Have you ever wondered what it would be like to witness an act of heroism in the heart of the African wilderness? Prepare to be amazed by the incredible story of a loyal companion who defied the odds to save a life. The sun was setting over the wide savanna, casting long golden shadows across the grasslands. The distant call of birds echoed through the trees, and the warm breeze carried with it the earthy scent of rain that had fallen earlier in the day. In this remote corner of Africa where humans rarely wandered, one man and his loyal companion lived in quiet harmony with nature. Daniel Harper was not a man who had chosen an ordinary life. Once a city dweller, he had left behind the noise and chaos of urban existence to dedicate himself to wildlife photography. After years of struggle, he had finally earned enough recognition to fund his dream: a small cabin near the Zambezi River, where he could capture the wild in its most authentic form. His closest companion was not another human, but a black Labrador named Max. Daniel had adopted Max. When the dog was barely 6 weeks old, rescued from a neglected home in the outskirts of London, over the years, Max had grown into more than a pet. He was Daniel's confidant, protector, and partner in every adventure. Together they roamed the vast wilderness, exploring, surviving, and recording the beauty of nature. Max had a keen intelligence and an unshakable loyalty that often amazed Daniel. He seemed to understand commands that were never spoken, moving with instinct whenever danger lurked. The two were inseparable, and in the quiet of the wilderness their bond grew even stronger. One humid afternoon, as the river shimmered beneath the sun, Daniel prepared his camera equipment for another trek. He had heard rumors from local rangers about a pride of lions that had recently moved closer to the river. Capturing images of lion cubs would be a remarkable achievement for his portfolio. "Come on, Max!" Daniel called as he slung his backpack over his shoulder. The Labrador bounded forward eagerly, his dark coat glistening as he splashed through shallow puddles. They followed the riverbank until the forest began to thicken. Birds scattered overhead, and a group of antelope darted past them, startled by some unseen presence. That was when Daniel heard a faint, desperate cry that didn't belong to any bird or antelope. It was high-pitched, raw with fear, and it came from the water itself. Daniel froze, narrowing his eyes toward the river. He spotted something small, struggling against the current. His heart skipped a beat. It was a lion cub, barely a few months old, thrashing helplessly as the strong waters pulled it downstream. "Oh my God," Daniel whispered. Without hesitation, Max had already sprung forward. The Labrador plunged into the water, his muscular body cutting through the current with powerful strokes. Daniel shouted, but Max didn't stop. The dog swam directly toward the cub, who was now moments away from being swept under. Daniel's camera dangled forgotten around his neck as he waded into the water, but he knew he couldn't reach them in time. His eyes remained locked on Max. The Labrador closed the distance swiftly, gripping the cub gently by the scruff of its neck, just as a lioness would. The cub let out a weak cry, but soon went limp, trusting its unexpected rescuer. The current was strong, and Max had to fight to turn back. Water splashed around him as he paddled with all his strength, the cub held carefully above the surface. Daniel's chest tightened with fear, but slowly, painfully, Max made his way back toward the bank. Daniel rushed forward, grabbing Max by the collar to help pull them both out of the river. Together they collapsed on the muddy ground, breathing heavily. Max released the cub gently, licking its wet fur as if to comfort it. The cub coughed weakly, then let out a soft, pitiful mewl. Its small body trembled, but it was alive. Daniel knelt beside them, awe filling his chest. "You did it, Max," he whispered, stroking the dog's soaked head. "You saved him." Daniel knew the cub couldn't survive on its own. Lion cubs depended on their pride, and without its mother, this one was doomed. But bringing it back to his cabin was dangerous. Raising a wild animal was not only illegal, but incredibly risky. The cub needed its family. Daniel wrapped the cub in his jacket, cradling it carefully. "We have to find where you belong," he murmured. Max wagged his tail as though agreeing. For hours, Daniel and Max followed the faint trails along the riverbank. They hoped to stumble upon the pride, guided by paw prints in the mud and the distant roars echoing in the savanna. The cub grew quieter in Daniel's arms, occasionally nuzzling against Max, who trotted faithfully beside them. By nightfall, Daniel set up a temporary camp. He built a small fire, warmed some milk he carried for emergencies, and coaxed the cub to drink from a makeshift bottle. The cub resisted at first, but eventually suckled weakly, gaining a bit of strength. As Daniel watched, he couldn't help but marvel at Max, who lay protectively beside the cub. The Labrador's dark eyes never left the tiny creature, as if he had accepted it as part of his pack. "You've got a big heart, Max," Daniel said softly. "Bigger than most humans I've ever known." The following morning, Daniel was awakened by Max's low growl. The Labrador stood alert, ears pricked, tail stiff. In the distance, Daniel heard it a deep, resonant roar that shook the air. His heart leaped. The pride was near. Quickly, he gathered the cub in his arms and motioned for Max to stay close. They moved cautiously through the tall grass until the figures of lions appeared ahead. A large lioness, her golden fur glistening in the morning sun, was pacing anxiously near the riverbank. Several other lionesses and a powerful male lingered nearby. The cub stirred in Daniel's arms, letting out a tiny squeak. The lioness froze, her head snapping toward the sound. In an instant, she bounded forward, her eyes blazing with both suspicion and desperate hope. Daniel's breath caught. He knew how dangerous this moment was. Any wrong move, and the pride could attack. Slowly, he lowered the cub to the ground. Max stood protectively at his side, but did not bark or move aggressively. The cub wobbled uncertainly before letting out a loud, plaintive cry. The lioness's expression changed instantly. She rushed forward, scooping the cub into her mouth with practiced gentleness. A deep rumble of relief vibrated in her chest. The cub squirmed happily, pressing against its mother's neck. Daniel exhaled, his hands trembling. Max wagged his tail as if sensing the reunion's success. The lioness looked up at Daniel and Max. For a brief moment, their eyes met, wild and human, predator and companion. Then, with a flick of her tail, she turned back toward the pride, carrying her cub safely with her. The lions disappeared into the tall grass, leaving Daniel and Max alone once more. Daniel sank to the ground, overwhelmed. He reached out and hugged Max tightly, burying his face in the dog's wet fur. "You're incredible," he whispered. "I don't know how to thank you." That evening, Daniel wrote the entire story in his journal. He described how Max had leapt into the river without hesitation, how he had carried the cub with such tenderness, and how he had faced down a lioness without fear. He knew that one day the world needed to hear about Max's courage. The wilderness was full of danger and beauty, but it was in that moment Daniel truly understood what it meant to live among it, to witness compassion where it was least expected, and to see loyalty that transcended species. From then on, whenever Daniel looked at Max, he no longer saw just a loyal Labrador. He saw a hero, a savior, and a reminder that sometimes the bravest hearts beat in the quietest chests.